Welcome back, everybody. My name is Luis Menacho, and today we're discussing how to shade on tone paper. Let's get started. Before we could understand how to shade on tone paper, we first need to learn the basic rules of tone paper. Let's start off with the simplified version of a sphere, which is what we will be drawing today. When starting a drawing on tone paper, it is important to separate your highlights from your midtones from your darks. For the light area of your drawing, you will only be using your light pencil. In the demo, we will be using a General's white charcoal pencil for the entire light area, and the tone should range from here to here. On the other hand, for your shadows, you should only be using your dark pencil. In the demo, we will be using a General's B2 charcoal pencil, and the tone should range from here to here. How you handle your midtones is what makes drawing on tone paper different from drawing on white paper. For a big portion of your midtones, you will be using the tone of the paper. That means that for a portion of your drawing, you will let the paper show through. In some cases, you will use a little bit of white to brighten your midtone, and in some cases, you will use a little bit of your dark pencil to darken the midtone. But in most cases, you will keep your midtones the tone of the paper. The most important thing to remember is to never mix your white pencil with your dark pencil. That doesn't mean that you can't have your whites and your darks right next to each other, but what it does mean is that you should never shade with your white pencil over your darks or with your dark pencil over your whites. If at any point you feel like that's necessary, take a step back and reevaluate whether or not you should actually be using the tone of the paper. Finally, this rule applies to whether you're drawing on white paper or tone paper. Your light values should never be as dark as any value in the shadow areas, and your shadow values should never be as light as any value in the light areas. Let's now apply what we just learned to our demo. Step 1. The outline. In this phase, we are drawing in the big shapes and mapping out where the lights and the shadows will be. If you're drawing something as complicated as a portrait, this phase will take a lot longer to do. Step 2. Basic tones. I start off by establishing where the lights and shadows will be. I do this by adding my lightest shadow value to the entire shadow area. I then start mapping out the big shadow areas. At this point, I am not worried too much about details. Make sure that your lines are clean so you can avoid having to do a lot of cleanup later. Step 3. Establish the darkest values. By establishing this early on, I'm able to have a very clear value range. This helps avoid having a scattered value range. Throughout the drawing, I could always refer back to my shadow area to pinpoint what is the darkest value in my drawing. In our case, the darkest value is here. Soon after establishing my darkest value, I would usually go straight to adding in my lightest value. But in this case, since my hand is over the light value most of the time, I decided to work on the dark value first. I didn't want my hand to smudge the light value. Once I'm done fleshing out the dark tones a little more, I will then start blending it into the midtones. Step 4. Blending the darks into the midtones. Since our midtones will be the value of the paper, what I'm doing here is blending in my shadow values into the paper. This way, we have a smooth transition from the shadow values into your mid values. When you're blending the shadow tones into the paper, it is important to constantly go back into your shadows to make sure that the values are still correct. At this point, I'm cleaning up the shadow areas, since I know once I add the light values, I won't be able to modify it much. Step 5. Establishing the light areas. Establishing your light areas is very similar to establishing your dark areas. We will start off by adding a general value to the entire light area. This value should be your darkest light. From there, we find a highlight, and then we blend it out. All that's left to do is to clean up the drawing and to hit that subscribe button. We're a new channel here and it would really help us out a lot. If you want notifications, hit the bell button. Thank you very much and I'll see you next time.